In today's video, I'm going to explain what the riskier option was and why you miss a lot of things about it in the third and fourth domain clashes that involve the riskier option. But to explain the riskier option, I must explain the third and fourth domain clash. Now let's begin. Third and fourth domain clash in Chapter 228 to 229. In the third domain clash, Gojo made his domain external barrier smaller than in basketball, which improved its density, and made it so it wouldn't get one-shot by cleave, but Sukuna easily countered this by making his expanded range even smaller to improve cleave's output. Then wasted 3 minutes to break UV from the outside because Sukuna wanted to adapt, and Gojo was able to damage Sukuna beyond the point where he couldn't maintain his domain. You may ask, what do you mean Sukuna wasted 3 minutes to break UV from the outside because he wanted to adapt? Well, remember Gojo said in Chapter 228 that when their sure hit cancel out each other inside the domain and Sukuna was using domain amplification, this gave him an advantage which gave him the upper hand for 3 minutes until his domain was broken. Well, this literally means Sukuna cancelled out UV's sure hit the entire 3 minutes, never once flip his conditions to power the outside sure hit, and was adapting the entire 3 minutes when he wasn't using domain amplification. It took 3 minutes because the only thing Sukuna did was decrease his sure hit range further. This wasting of time to adapt setup was shown perfectly in the fourth domain clash. Sukuna cancelled out UV's sure hit, plus he didn't flip his conditions and was adapting when he wasn't using domain amplification. Then he broke UV with cleave by lowering his expanded range further. Remember, Sukuna's domain amplification isn't strong enough to handle UV's output, so the moment Sukuna isn't making contact with Gojo, he's done. It would pretty much look like when Gojo did use Fallen Emotion, except even if DA lowered the power of the sure hit, he still would get hit and immobilize. This means Sukuna wasn't fighting inside the domain with domain amplification on and his sure hit off inside the domain, as he would need to touch Gojo to survive UV. Now let's explain what the riskier option was. Since Gojo made his domain smaller and harder to break, this gave Sukuna the perfect opportunity to speed up the adaptation process. So Sukuna never used another curse technique inside the domain to break UV from the inside so as to not cancel out 10 shadows, nor did he flip his internal conditions to break UV faster like what he did in the second domain clash. This allowed Sukuna to prolong the battle inside the domain so that he had an entire 3 minutes to adapt when he wasn't using domain amplification to protect himself. The riskier option also gave Gojo the advantage. This means Sukuna had no real means to really damage Gojo beyond the point where he couldn't maintain UV, but Gojo can damage Sukuna beyond that point due to being able to use Infinity Blue and Red inside the domain, but Sukuna was able to minimize the damage using domain amplification so that his domain doesn't collapse before the 3 minutes, as that would lead to Gojo winning. The fifth domain clash also played out similarly. Since Sukuna's domain was still expanded, Gojo still needed to damage Sukuna beyond the point where he can't maintain his domain in less than 3 minutes, which Gojo did in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. This proved my point that Sukuna in the third and fourth domain clash didn't turn off his sure hit on the inside to power the outside sure hit, and was adapting the entire 3 minutes, as the only difference between the fifth and fourth domain clash was that Sukuna got hit by UV for a few seconds, which prevent him from defending him with domain amplification. This pretty much means Sukuna could break UV in one shot if he flipped his domain conditions or if he used cleave or other techniques to break it from the inside, but that would slow the adaptation process. So if Sukuna wasn't adapting, he would have broken UV faster. Well, this is the end of the video. I hope you now understand what the riskier option was.